These are my top 25 teams in college football after week 2 of action on September the 7th of 2025. Going in at number 1, Ohio State. Look, they beat Texas. They were one of the top teams. Then they went 70-0 over Grambling, and that basically speaks for itself. Penn State at number 2. They shut out FIU. Only 34 points on the board, which is still great, but you could argue in the first 2 wins, the offense, you could command a little bit more. Either way, Drew Aller looking pretty good there, and he threw a couple of tutties, so Penn State at 2. Oregon I have at 3. They jumped Texas and looked really good. 69-3 the winner over Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State obviously one of the, not necessarily the best team in the Power 4, but when you can beat a team that is an FBS team like that at home, that is getting my attention. Oregon at 3. Texas, they are still one of the top teams, and Arch Manning a bounce back game. Had those few touchdowns in just a few minutes there. They come in at number 4, and they beat San Jose State rather soundly. At 5, I have Mississippi, maybe a surprise, but remember that they were one of my top teams, and then they beat Kentucky on the road in the SEC, a touchdown win this early in the season. Pretty impressive to me. They're at 5. Georgia, kind of spinning wheels right now. They do beat Austin Peay, but not as impressive of a win. 28-6 there over an FCS team who definitely was overmatched. At 7, LSU. I also slide them back, and they win 23-7, so they do take care of business against La Tech. But keep in mind that LSU also the big win over Clemson, who did not look good. We're going to talk about in a second. Miami wins sort of, walk in the park for them. 45-3 over Bethune-Cookman, and just asking a lot of the Wildcats there to go down to Miami and win, and they kind of cruise to a victory there. Carson Beck looking good again, and their defense rather sound. Notre Dame, I have as the number 9 team. They did not play, so I'm not going to really move them up or down. Tennessee at 10. I think the Volunteers look good again. They get a nice win over East Tennessee State, and 72-17. You would think with Nico Iamaleava out, they could potentially drop back on offense. That doesn't look like that's happening right now. At number 11, USC, Southern California. A little surprised they're not even in the top 25 after last week, knowing this program, but they're 2-0 now. They beat Georgia Southern 59-20. Another great offensive performance, and Clay Helton back in the house there at USC. But either way, Lincoln Riley has another good offense, and it looks like they can really ride that to some big heights. The Trojans, to me, as a top 11 team. South Carolina, they do win. They're also kind of in the mix there in the top 15. 38-10, not the biggest margin, not a huge blowout against another FCS team, so kind of hard to take too much from it. I got them at 12. Auburn, the Tigers, at 13. They win 42-3 over Ball State, so pretty good performance, but again, they could really take some of the wheels off as you got to the second half, so they sort of cruised to win, and they're kind of in the same spot as last week. Texas A&M at 14. They win again, and I still believe in the talent, just all the money that's behind this program right now, so they should be good, although they didn't look ridiculously impressive against Utah State. End up winning 44-22, although keep in mind, they did kind of let things happen in the second half there, so they may have been taking some of the heat off, and then there's some late touchdowns and scores by Utah State. Alabama at 15, and the Crimson Tide, it should definitely be better than their 14-point loss to Florida State, so they beat UL Monroe 73-0. That was a get-right game. You gotta love Ty Simpson in that one. He throws for 3 touchdowns, literally 17 for 17, 100% completions, and that defense looked fierce against UL Monroe. We'll see if Bama is peed off enough to basically continue to bounce back. 583 yards there against the Warhawks. I have Clemson at 16. They drop back again to me after their unimpressive performance against Troy, and this offense looks a little stifled right now. They're trying to figure it out in the running backs room. I think Kate Klubnik is also leaving something on the table, but only 27 points against Troy and only an 11-point win there. Not particularly impressive as a home big favorite, so Clemson still looking for a big showing there in the ACC. And Florida I have at 17, and there's going to be a freak out for them losing to South Florida, which is a really bad loss, and it does go to show that Florida is still not one of the top national contending teams, but at the end of the day, I do believe they still have enough talent to win some games coming down the line, and I could see this being like the Miami loss last year, where they kind of got a shock to their system early, and they can maybe bounce back and start a winning streak from this. But shout out to South Florida. It was hard not to put them in the top 25, to be honest, with their wins so far. And at 18, I got Texas Tech, so they do play Kent State, which is one of the worst teams in the FBS, but ultimately 62 points again. This offense is ridiculous right now, and they look like a classic Big 12 offense. I love Baron Morton. He's got another 3 touchdowns there, and I just wonder how many yards this team's going to put up this year. Had 601 again against the Golden Flashes, so nice showing, although we still haven't seen Texas Tech play anybody huge. That'll be a big test coming up for them when they do. Oklahoma at 19, they win by a few points against Michigan, a little more than they're expected to, and that was a big game for them. They needed needed to win that one and start going in the right direction. They do beat a young quarterback there against the Wolverines, and good to see the team really didn't melt down in the spotlight, and they were consistent throughout the game, found a way to put up some points on a tough defense, so you got to give them credit. And Utah at 20 still love the Utes, and they show up again, winning 63-9 against Cal Poly, who obviously was a bit overmatched in that situation, another FCS team, but Utah really winning by that margin is what's impressive, and so you got to give it to them. They look great on offense. And Missouri at 21, one of the better games of the week that wasn't talked about just because in the AP it was not a top 25 game, but Missouri I had ranked last week. I'd moved them up a little bit. Good showing against Kansas. They were actually down in the game, and they ended up coming back rather quickly on that Kansas team. They had 21 points in the second half and 15 as well in the second quarter to storm back after going down 21-6. So big credit to Missouri, and they look like maybe a real deal there in the SEC that can kind of contend for something. Bo Pribula again, 30 for 39, 3 tutties. He was also very good in the air, over 330 yards. And Michigan, they do lose on the road, but with a young quarterback, they were in most of that game. They were pretty consistent as well, and they were hanging around, so you've got to give them some credit for that. You went into a ruckus environment as the biggest game of the week on ABC, and they still competed for much of the game, so even though they lost a little bit worse than maybe you might have expected, you can't be too upset or move them too far down, so I will keep them at 22. And jumping into the top 25, Indiana lands at 23, another nice performance for the Hoosiers. They were playing Kennesaw State, who has a lot of things to figure out, but the margin is what we're looking at here without a lot of big matchups this week, and you got to give Indiana credit for putting up 56 points there and almost 600 yards of total offense. They did not turn the ball over either, which is always a positive sign. And also jumping into the top 25 for me this week, and maybe others aren't watching it, but Georgia Tech, another good win by margin. They also beat Colorado on the road, who looked pretty good against Delaware, so I got to give them some credit for that. And the team from Atlanta, Georgia, making their way into the top 25. But Florida State, and speaking of this, our last team of the rankings, Florida State at 25. Still want to pump the brakes a little on this team. I feel like some of the models might overrate them slightly, and I'm still a little bit concerned about how few games they won last year. Actually, a really good thing for them this week because Alabama won and looked strong against UL Monroe, so that makes their win against them look even better. And then they put up 77 against East Texas A&M, so hard to give them as much credit as I would have liked, only from the standpoint that they were playing an FCS team who was very overmatched, and you can name the score, so you could argue they were running it up. But Florida State, I got them respect. They're at my 25 spot there. So the teams I dropped this week, Arizona State, they were 25. They were out of the rankings. Frankly, I didn't even want to put them in last week, but we just saw they lose to Mississippi State on the road as a almost touchdown favorite, and they're out of my top 25. Hopefully they can, if you're a Sun Devils fan, get back in there soon. But Southern Methodist also out. I had to jump them out. For some of the other teams, they were at 20, and they did lose at Baylor in a big shootout. Louisville was at 24, and I still think they're a pretty good team, but for right now, I've got these other teams ahead of them as they looked okay in their win against James Madison. So the new teams, just to recap real quick, Georgia Tech, Indiana, Florida State. The bubble teams to look out for moving forward right now, Louisville, Arkansas, Washington, Texas Christian, Brigham Young, Iowa State, and South Florida. They could really jump in pretty soon if they keep things going. And that's my top 25 this week, guys. Drop some comments and a like down below if you have any thoughts. Feel free to subscribe if you like content like this. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.